Hello guys, today we're looking at the penultimate boss in Ny'alotha with the Carapace of Ny'alotha.
Yes, this three-phase encounter is awesome, and just like Il'gynoth, it's one of our favourites in here. There's a lot for us to explain here as there's just so much going on, so we're going to jump in straight away at the start of the fight.
So throughout the entire encounter you'll notice that you have an extra resource bar. This is your sanity, and over the course of the fight you'll have to manage it in different ways. And if you don't, and it does reach 0, you'll become buffed with increased damage and healing for 20 seconds, and when that expires, you'll then become mind controlled and just spam cast Mental Decay, which drains sanity from players and deals damage. So ideally you'll never want to reach 0, apart from maybe towards the end of the fight. Now the first phase starts on the exterior of the Carapace, and phase 2 will begin when the Fury of Ny'alotha is brought to 50% health. This guy will cast Madness Bomb on random players. When this times out, it deals moderate damage to all players within 10 yards and then fears them. This also drains sanities from non-targeted players, so if you're debuffed, make sure you move far away from others. He will however cast Mental Decay on random players. This deals light ticking damage whilst removing sanity, and this is completely unavoidable. For tanks, he'll cast Mandible Slam. This deals a burst of physical damage and applies a debuff that increases the damage you take from this by 100%. You'll just want to make sure that you taunt on 2. Last to mention for the Fury is that he'll buff adds with a damage absorption shield that lasts for 12 seconds, making them also immune to crowd control. If you do enough damage to break the shield within the 12 seconds, a fragment of sanity will spawn nearby for 15 seconds. A player can soak this to restore 10 sanity. This is listed as important in the dungeon journal, but we didn't find it all that important while we were testing. This is because in this phase you can move to Rathian at the entrance of the room, and he'll give you your sanity back, so you can just stand near him and it will completely restore. And you can also use your extra action button. This will fly you towards Rathian, healing you up to 100% health and making you immune briefly to sanity loss, but this has a 2-minute cooldown. What method to use at what point I guess is kind of situational, but for the most part it's not too important in this phase as the sanity loss isn't very severe. In this phase you'll also have growth covered tentacles to deal with. These spawn by creating massive shadows across the room, and shortly afterwards they slam into that location, and this just deals lethal damage to any player's hit. Immediately, horrific hemorrhages will spawn on the tentacle, and you have 60 seconds to defeat them before they explode and deal massive raid-wide damage. You can gain access to them by climbing on top of the tentacle. The hemorrhages while active will just spam cast globules that deal moderate damage in a 5-yard targeting circle that spawn nightmare antigens. These adds melee hits reduce the target's haste and movement speed, which stacks, and they also gain a stacking damage increase and slow speed reduction. We had our melee nuke the hemorrhages whilst range just cleave the little adds underneath the boss, and that seemed to work pretty well. Once all of the hemorrhages die, the tentacle will back away and the Fury of Ny'alotha will lose a large amount of health. The other ad that spawns is the Gaze of Madness. This casts Breed Madness, which is interruptible and hits several targets, dealing large ticking damage to them. When it's kicked or when the cast finishes, it also drains sanity from all players in the raid and deals a burst of damage. It also gains a 5% damage increase for each cast. This ad is number 1 on DPS priority and should be nuked immediately when it spawns, and ideally you shouldn't kick it, otherwise you're going to lose too much sanity and the ad is going to cast the ability more often. Once you've got the hang of all of that, you'll want to try to transition the boss at 50% health with no ads. Be careful when doing this, and note, of course, when the ads die, they also deal damage to the Fury of Ny'alotha, so try time it with that in mind. At which point Rathian will fly down and blast a hole into the Carapace.
The Fury will run down between the 2 platforms and begin to cast abilities you saw from phase 1, except he'll be stood still and won't go after your tanks. Here you have 2 paths, one on the left and one on the right. Both paths have synthesis growths all over the walls that are channeling into the boss, healing him for a fair amount whilst making him immune to incoming damage and healing reduction effects. You will need to kill all of these growths before engaging Ny'alotha again. On the paths you'll find cysts. These slow you and deal ticking damage, but in G'huun fashion, they can be damaged to reduce their size. So there are essentially 2 different strategies you can use here. You can either split your raid down each path or stick as a group. Arguably you could say that splitting is faster, but as a group seems far safer, and aside from the hardened rage of the fight, there isn't much stopping you from doing this as slow and as safely as you want. We decided to clear the left and then use our extra action button to go back to the start because you'll return to Rathian, who's at the beginning of the room, you'll gain your sanity back, and then you can just go and clear the right. After clearing all of the growths, you then jump down and then engage the Fury. Now, aside from all of his phase 1 abilities, he will be casting Eternal Darkness, draining 10 sanity from the raid whilst dealing damage to everybody. This is unavoidable. He'll also cast a Frontal Blast that deals a massive amount of damage to anyone in it and also removes 40 sanity from those players. Generally speaking, standing near the boss makes dodging this beam far easier. Once you got the boss to 40% health, he'll transition into phase 3. Before this point, it is a very good idea to reset your sanity back to full, because in the last phase, it is not easy to do so because Rathian completely abandons you. In this last phase, the boss still has Mandible Slam on the tank, Mental Decay, draining sanity from random players, and it also still casts his Infinite Darkness ability. Apparently this is supposed to be spawning some sort of sphere of evil or something, but that wasn't present on the PTR. You might want to look out for it on live servers. Players will also be debuffed with Insanity Bomb. This debuff explodes after 12 seconds, dealing damage to all players within the targeting circle, whilst also fearing them. This also removes sanity from non-targeted players within your circle. To add, this also spawns a Nightmare Antigen nearby, the little guys that you saw from the tentacles in phase 1. Whilst it might feel important to nuke them down here as soon as possible, it's actually best to wait. When the boss casts Adaptive Membrane, just like he does in phase 1, it will apply a shield to all of those little adds. If you break that shield, then a shitload of Fragment of Sanities will spawn, each giving you 10 sanity when you run over them, and this is the only way you can gain sanity back in this last phase. So as soon as they get their shield, you want to kill off that set of adds before the next set spawn, and then you just simply repeat this. The only other thing going on in this phase, which most of you noticed I'm sure, is all of the tentacles slamming down. They're the same as phase 1 tentacles, the only difference is that they won't have hemorrhages on them, you just simply need to avoid the slam zones.
So this last phase could be wrapped up as spread, so you don't hit other players with your insanity bombs, and just ignore adds until they gain the shields, at which point you nuke them down, and soak the orbs if your sanity is getting low, whilst just dodging all the tentacles come down, and just hope that you can kill the boss before it becomes too out of control and people start becoming mind controlled. Which for us on PTR wasn't really an issue, as Tremor Totem completely removed the effect and just gave all their sanity back. It's almost definitely not going to work like that on live servers, so you should get used to the idea of trying to keep your sanity as high as possible. Our issue on the PTR was that the boss was just hitting a hard enrage, which might be a tuning issue, or it might just be our shit damage whilst we're looking at other mechanics. It's really hard to say, and we don't really know until we hit live servers. As for the Mythic version of the encounter, it was never tested, but from what we've read, Phase 1 is more or less the same, and the fight really seems to appear during Phase 2. Rathian is no longer there to help you, so getting your sanity back is going to be a complete bitch, and the last phase begins the moment all the synthesis adds are killed, meaning that you're going to have a really long last phase because the boss is going to have at least 10% more health than he would in Heroic. And to add, when a synthesis ad is killed, they also spawn the little ads from the phase 1 tentacles, and on top of that, the cysts that slow you will now explode after 18 seconds once they've been reduced to their smallest size, dealing massive damage to anyone near them, meaning that you've got to move slowly around on the platforms, making a new one small before the previous one explodes on top of the raid. And if the fight can't sound any more difficult, these cysts are present in the last phase.
Yeah, they're listed in the dungeon journal. So we're kind of thinking they might cover the entire room or something.
Yeah. At least I hope so.
So I think our guild might just, stop playing before that boss because holy shit, that sounds mental. Especially because the boss gains a damage increase if he ever stands on any of the cysts. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. But yeah, that's the fight. What are your impressions of it?
I think it's a great fight, mechanically sound, and for the most part needs very few adjustment and changes before it hits live servers. I think phase 1 is absolutely awesome. We picked up this in our lad episode saying how great we think the animation is of the tentacle slam instead of it just being like a red glowy zone. Instead, it's just a shadow.
Yeah.
It's just a really, really cool way of representing the mechanic. One slightly negative thing about the encounter is I'd say that phase 2 is maybe a little bit too long. It feels quite slow. Yeah,
especially the first part when you're doing the Cahoon job, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think that might have been either because the ads had too much health or because we weren't doing the split strategy. Arguably, the split strategy would be overall faster, but because the boss is casting Eternal Darkness during this time and you're guaranteed losing sanity through that, as well as through Mental Decay, as well as if anyone makes any mistakes with the Madness Bombs, we were a little bit concerned that people might run out of sanity.
Yeah.
So we always just stuck to one side, and then everyone has a hard reset of their sanity by using their cape, and then you'll go up the other path. So that's what we found to be the safest, but maybe not the quickest. So maybe it's our fault that it felt so long. And of course, it was PTR. The boss had like 1 billion more health than he really should have. So it might just be tuning as well.
Yeah, that's a possibility. And then as for phase 3, again, another race to the end where players are slowly losing sanity.
Yep, it's going to be pretty fucking cool. One thing that you do need to be careful of, though, at least on PTR, is that you can fall through the middle of the room.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I died pretty quick there. So you got to be a little bit careful. I assume that's going to be fixed for life. But yeah, like the whole idea of spreading out, spawning the ads, then trying to stack back up so the tanks can pick them up, but just don't kill the ads just yet. Because if you just annihilate all the ads, you're going to be so low on sanity. People are going to die that way because the boss is still casting Eternal Darkness. And even if you do lose sanity, maybe right at the end of the fight, the last 20 seconds of the fight, that's the perfect time to gain that Gift of N'Zoth buff where you get 100% increased damage and healing, because then you'll just blast through the boss. But on normal and heroic, trying to time that correctly is going to be very, very difficult. Better to play it safe and slow rather than just try and rush and end up killing yourself and probably most of your raid.
And this last phase in Mythic, Blizzard, please fill it up with cysts. That would be so good.
Yeah.
But thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this preview, then do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. And before you do go, make sure you check out our guide over on Wowhead. A link for that can be found in the description below. It'll give you all the information you need to know about this boss whenever any changes are made or any new strategies come out. So make sure you go take a look. And we shall see you all in the next one.
Thanks for watching.